And so she said, here, I'll send you a trail camera picture because then you'll see why I didn't think he was that big. In the trail camera photo, he looks 200.
David's like women.
And we're back.
Hey.
HUNTR Podcast, episode.
That's why I told you we got to stop counting.
I might stop counting at 100 or something. We'll see. I like to at least start that. Consistency.
Yeah. Good to see you again, man.
Hey, yeah, we're
Week
back.
and a half.
We're back. Well, I mean, I'm sure everybody's like, actually, a couple people made a comment. They're like, man, I can't believe you only got like one podcast at ATA, and then we started rolling them out. So if you're watching this podcast, last week was Forrest Carter. Carter releases when we were at ATA show, which was a really cool conversation. If you haven't watched it, I think you should check it out simply because you might be surprised some of the things that he talks about that you're like, oh shit, maybe I have a little target panic.
I've actually had a couple people write me personally just on Facebook and Instagram and stuff saying that they've been dealing with it like since the early 90s.
Did our buddy Jay write you from the bounty hunter dude? The guy who gave us our challenge coin?
Did he write me?
Yeah.
About?
He wrote me and said that he had that same issue.
No, he didn't write me.
Yeah.
I was talking to him before that, but
yeah, same issue. And I'm like, you guys are both like monsters. Like, what do you mean you can't lift your bow up?
it has nothing to do with strength.
I know. That's what. It's just such a weird concept. But yeah,
I think it can only negatively affect you. Like shooting a bow that's too heavy may be a contributing factor to target panic, but
it's mental.
It's mental.
Yeah, crazy. So anyways, if you haven't watched that, go back and do that. I think also we're back on the giveaways. So we're going to give away another Stealth Cam Fusion X this week.
Yeah. And for everybody that's received those late, we can blame Jeremy because when I come into the office once a week, that's when those get sent out. So to anybody still waiting, it's in the mail.
When you say office, like podcast, Jeremy's office, that's about it. I've been gone for like a week too. I've been living in the Kentucky cabin for about a week.
Yeah.
Well,
dude, let's run through like what happened real quick because I want to share it kind of.
Okay.
So we were not last week, the week before.
Yep.
We were getting ready to sit down and do a podcast with David Holder, who's our guest today.
Correct.
And we're sitting here, and I got an email notification as we were getting ready.
You didn't say anything either. Your face just like looked, and I think I looked at Colt, and I was like, what you?
So the backstory was I had to get a COVID test because we're going to Bahamas, Nassau for a week.
Yep.
My first vacation in like 3 years. So it was sweet. We're back from that now. We're sitting here getting ready to do this podcast the week before we left, and I got that test result back, positive. And this would have been 2-3 weeks after ATA.
Yeah, 2 weeks.
And so, like, if I had gotten it at some point, that's when it would have been.
I would have had it as well.
For sure. So I had this positive test, and I was like, that's not right. There's no way.
You were leaving,
there's no way.
Like 2 days, like not even 36 hours later.
It was Thursday. We're getting ready to leave Saturday.
Yeah.
And so to go to the Bahamas, you have to have a negative PCR test uploaded so that they can create a travel visa for you.
Yep. So
it's a very tight time frame to get this stuff turned around. So I'm like, shoot, where am I going to get another test taken in 24 hours? So we bailed on the podcast.
Yep. Left.
I went straight to another place, took another test. They were turning them around typically in like 24 hours, which was sweet. Went home. Right from there, took an antigen test that I have at home, a blood antigen test.
Which was negative.
Negative. No antibodies either, indicating I've not had it. So that the ATA thing's out the window. Okay. From there, talked to one of our friends that was in the Bahamas that was like, yeah, that happened to me. Just keep going and getting tests. One of them's going to come back
to the PCR testing areas.
So I did. I went to 2 more places. So 4 total. The company's called Curative. They have like local pop-up deals.
Yeah.
No swab, you throw it in 24 hours. They send it to you. Long story short, of those PCR tests, I had 2 come back positive and 2 come back negative with intermingled dates. So it's not like I was positive and then I was negative or vice versa.
50-50 chance.
And then since then had the antigen, I took it home, took an antigen 2 days after we got to the Bahamas, took one right before we had to come back. All of those have been negative.
Crazy.
So basically what we saw is those PCR tests from Curative yielded a 50-50.
Oh.
It's 50-50.
Yeah. Yeah, it's impossible. I mean,
which is bullshit.
It's a false positive. And I know that they talk about the home test being like whatever, 75 or 80% accurate when it is positive and like 99 if it's negative. But like those ones are supposed to be like as close to 90+% accurate as possible. The fact that you were 50-50, That doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, and dude, there are some people that take to the extreme and say, well, COVID's not real and all.
It's real.
Yeah, I'm definitely not in that boat. Like there's people getting sick and there's people that have died, and I don't want to make light of that at all. I'm not in that camp, but holy cow, dude. You have to be able to make decisions based off accurate testing.
And we should say, like, you had no symptoms. There were no indications that, like, you may have had, like, you were having COVID. You felt fine.
Negative.
And you went to the Bahamas.
Yeah. So long story short, I just kept getting tested, and I used one of those negative tests, and we were able to pull that off.
And eventually, all negatives following that.
Yeah, and dude, vacation is vacation. I mean, it's not going to seriously impact my life if we don't get to go.
Sure,
it would suck. It would be a waste of money. But like, there are some people out there, trying to run businesses off of these types of results, like on a daily return, or whether or not you're able to go and do certain life-changing things, like way more important than vacation.
It's crazy.
Be with loved ones in the hospital, like.
Yeah, it's not.
Like, who are we supposed to trust with this?
Yeah, they're not. If those aren't accurate, then for sure the home tests that we're all trying to find at pharmacies and stuff aren't accurate either.
So I think at this point, I'm kind of like, if you're having symptoms, yeah, play it safe, get tested. If it also says you're positive, yeah, be smart, try to quarantine or whatever. But, dude, if you're not having symptoms and you test positive, I think test again.
Yeah. Moral of the story, kids, don't do drugs.
Test again.
So you're here, COVID-free.
Yeah, so I was worked up. I wanted to share that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but that was so not that we didn't mean to drop Forrest's episode last week, but we were going to try to do David's last Tuesday, Forrest on Thursday. We're kind of back on this 1-to-1, at least for another couple weeks probably. And then we filmed the first I Bought a Farm officially this morning.
Yep.
So that will also start to come out every couple weeks here, coinciding with the HUNTR main podcast here. So, yeah, I bought a farm last week.
Yep.
I closed on the Ohio place that we keep talking about. Man, it felt like it took forever. Like, I sat there and thought, I was like, man, I looked at that place in like early November, and it's like February. Took a long time to get it thing. And it's not, that's just the process right now. Shit's crazy. Trying to get a survey, and I didn't even have to get one, like, was insane.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, it's just a process, and now we start figuring out what's on it. Hopefully deer.
So now we're back, and now things start to move really quickly. Like, we've got...
It's you're listening to this in February.
We're out of trade show season. Our business is getting ready to reopen. It's tag season right now. All these management goals. You just bought a farm. Shed season. This is where our head's at.
Yep. And so, trying to bring it all back in, we called David back up and said, hey, how about now for a podcast?
Yeah. So David's a good friend of ours, and not that there's any right or wrong time to have him on, but so David's an Iowa guy, family guy, very involved in the ministries that they run through some bow camps, and
raised hunting, raised a full draw, raised outdoors, all part, everything around bow hunting.
And one of the people that they have, I don't know if she technically works for David or they have some kind of a partnership, but Donise who runs raised that full draw, killed a absolute mammoth.
Stud, like high 180s or something.
Just a giant.
Yeah, monster.
And some of them deer just have a look. Like, you can see 180-inch deer that are just very, very typical 10 points, and that's awesome. Those are cool. But there are some deer that just they are distinct animals.
Just gnarly.
And that was one of them.
Yeah, it was a monster. So I'll be interested, not that he's going to give us the GPS coordinates, but like how close that was to him. Because I think Dunnies lives not far from them.
Cool.
Same area. So anyways, without further ado, David Holder, Raised Hunting. Hey.
What's going on?
All right, man.
I can't complain.
Well,
good, but you guys don't have a long enough podcast for me to start listing all my complaints.
Oh, they're not that many.
We can make it longer.
Well, I mean, like Jared and I are saying, so this actually, we're going to turn this around quick, David. So this will actually air tomorrow night. So February 1st. Hard to believe that it's already February. Crazy. 2022. It's just nuts.
The older you get, the faster the years go.
Well, I mean, first of all, David, thanks for coming on and being flexible with our schedule in this. A couple big things. Obviously, so you guys are going into which season of raised hunting this year?
This is season 9.
Wow.
Well, season 9 has been recorded. We're actually hunting for season 10 now.
Very cool, man. That's crazy.
Yeah.
It's funny to see, I think that obviously we've seen kind of the family aspect of hunting, really have that resurgence here in the last, 5 to 10 years. But, I feel like you guys kind of were the true first show that kind of brought that back out, into really the public's eye.
That was honestly, that probably would have to be credited to Karen more than anyone, because she's the one that said, all the hunting shows have been done, why do another one just like everyone else's? And so basically she laid down the law and said, if we're going to do this, we're going to do it with an entirely different outcome or a different end goal that we were looking for there. And so, I kind of had to go to the drawing board, and we were working with Modern Legacy at the time when we began. And one redneck and one dude that knew cameras sat down and Raised Hunting was born. And to me, I think I look back and what I love to hear or see, or now I can look at it, and I had people say, you got 2 or 3 years worth of stories to tell. And then what are you going to do? Mm-hmm. And I was like, well, I don't know. I assume that we'll just continue to live life. So I hope that the stories will come. Well, there's more than I could possibly tell in a lifetime.
Yeah.
Every day is a new story, new chapter.
So, David, I think just, probably a lot of our listeners are very familiar with you and with Raised Hunting, but just to kind of get down nitty gritty for us, tell us some of your background. Where were you born? Where'd you grow up? How'd you get into this thing?
Well, I think, and it kind of comes out through the shows, but so I grew up on the East Coast, just like you guys. I know you guys at times have, I don't know if you're still living in Pennsylvania.
We are.
Or, but Virginia is very similar. And I was actually inside the Beltway.
Oh, wow.
So it's just outside of Washington, D.C. Knew at a young age that I didn't fit there. I didn't belong. I loved to hunt and fish, and it just wasn't. So people in the city can have that same desire, but it was much more difficult to do that. So first opportunity I got, I moved to Arkansas. And the only reason I picked Arkansas was that's where my, and what you guys are hearing right now is I have a black lab that's trying to get comfortable on his bed. So it's not like, now he's going to do it just to be funny. He'll go scratch it and roll around. There he goes. But we moved to Arkansas because I had family down there, and continued to hunt there. I lived there for 5 years. That's where I got in the fire service. And then as much as I love the South and kind of consider myself from the South, it was just really, really hot and slow. Meaning we didn't have to do a whole lot.
It's hot. I lived there for 5 years in Mississippi, man, and for a northern guy, my blood couldn't handle that stuff, man.
Yeah. And I was like, okay, I need a different. So I looked at the Midwest, but Karen actually pointed at Montana, and so I continued my fire career when we went out there.
Did you meet?
I was retired out.
Did you meet Karen in Arkansas, David? Did you meet Karen in Arkansas?
Did I live in Arkansas?
Did you meet Karen in
Arkansas? I met Karen. Karen and I went to school together.
In Virginia?
Yeah. So we're actually coming up on 30 years. We'll have a 30-year anniversary. 6 days from now, next month. So March 6th.
Wow.
Right on.
So, yeah. And so, so she traveled with me everywhere I went. But now, and then she really kind of got into hunting more as we moved.
Yeah.
She grew up in a hunting family, but kind of, you guys aren't as old as I am, but the hunting tradition back then was more the females went along. They really weren't invited to actually do the hunting. Mm-hmm. And that's where her family was. But when I met her, I was like, I want you to go with me, and I'll never forget her first kill was a squirrel. And she shoots this squirrel with a shotgun too. We didn't play games with our squirrels, we're killing them.
Yeah.
And she shoots the squirrel, it falls on the ground. I walk over there, and here's this beautiful young lady, blonde hair, and tears streaming down her face. And I thought, this is not good.
It's just a tree rat, Karen.
Well, I'm trying to do that, whatever's the most philosophical way to not ruin this, but it takes a breath. And she's like, it's still breathing. So I stepped on its head.
Your man's got this.
And I'm like, okay, so I don't know how this is going to go. I handed it to her. And she says, where do you put them? I just said, here, I just stick them in my pocket. So I put the squirrel in my pocket and we take off walking, and I'm watching her now because I'm thinking, I have ruined this date. I've just, crushed her confidence. And we go about 50 yards and all of a sudden I hear boom, she shoots again. And I'm going to walk over there and go through the whole consoling thing again. And I see her scoop up this squirrel, shoved it in her own pocket, and kept on going.
She said, that one's not breathing.
I said, I'm marrying that one right
You
there.
got a winner now.
So
that's funny,
that's
man.
really where the hunting stuff started for us.
Very cool.
But the fire service took us to Montana, continued my career there almost 20 years before they retired me out. I herniated 3 discs in my back.
Oof.
And so once that happened, then I needed a job, and I was like, all right, I need to figure out something else I like to do, but they wouldn't let me do the extremely physical things that I wanted to do. And so I looked at TV. I already had a ton of the footage and stuff like that. And I was like, I think I know what I'm doing. I was working for Primos at the time as a pro staffer, but then they had actually given me a coordinator. So I was coordinating all the Western pro staff. And so they saw some of the footage that I had and used it on their shows. And that kind of told me, hey, if they can use it, then I would say what we're doing is as good as anyone else's for TV. And then Karen's job actually brought us to Iowa. And when it brought us to Iowa, that's when I sat down in a coffee shop one day with Adam Jordison of Modern Legacy. And there we began the conversation of, how do you make someone feel what hunting is about?
Mm-hmm.
That was the difference. We didn't want to show someone what hunting was. We wanted them to feel it. We wanted emotion into an outdoor television show.
Yeah. And I think that's where Jared and I mean, that's one of the reasons we kind of set out on this whole podcast thing is we're trying to get at, I guess, the root or the center of why people hunt. Right. And there's so many different ways to it, but it's also because and I can speak for you, I think in this, David, is the 3 of us, we feel it. When we hunt or why we hunt, we feel it deep. And sometimes I don't know how to explain that to someone, especially somebody who doesn't hunt.
And you can't. You have to show them. You hear we all use the same tendencies to describe it. Mm-hmm. Oh, that adrenaline rush. Mm-hmm. Well, it's not that adrenaline rush. It's the simple smell of standing in that some days you smell earth. You could be at a soccer game, at your kid's soccer game, you smell earth and it makes you think of hunting. Mm-hmm. You smell firewood burning somewhere and it makes you think of November 1st.
Yeah.
It's those little tiny things driving down the road, and you watch the road for 2 seconds and you're looking in a field for 2 seconds. That's the tendencies that when it just gets that deep involved in you that you can't explain to someone. I don't think that there's words for it. We'll continue to try, because I hate to think that there's people out there that will never experience some of the things that the outdoors offers us.
Yeah. Do you think that there are, and we had this talk kind of at ATA a little bit when we were interviewing some of our guests, do you think that there's some people in this industry that don't necessarily feel it like we think they should feel it?
I think some. I think some are maybe in it for the wrong reasons, hoping to make a lot of money. Maybe some of them are in it for, maybe there are people that just like the killing aspect of it,
that's dark.
That's not me. I'm not wired that way.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't get me wrong. I understand I'm killing an animal, but there's a remorse that goes along with that. Whether it's an animal I know or, and so I'm trying to do it as humanely and quickly as possible, and there's a pride in it. It's more of an accomplishment, and knowing that what I'm accomplishing is also doing a good thing.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's sort of like this whole trail camera thing.
I know.
Right now, that's a big issue, right?
Yeah.
The states are banning it. They're probably rightfully so banning it because people are abusing it.
Sure. Yep.
So.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's one of those things too, and you can't describe it until you've done it, but there are certain deer that I've harvested that when I've killed them, I feel almost a killing remorse, not because I didn't want to kill it, but because it's that chapter's over. And it's a weird feeling because you spend so much time, you are so vested in it, and then it happens and then you're like, shit, now what?
Yeah.
you know?
Well, I would tell you the deer you'll see that will air this year is a deer that I had 6 years of history with. I have every single shed except for one.
Wow.
And I finally killed him this year. And it's almost shed season now. And I find myself going, well, if I go down and walk on the north end of I'm not going to find his sheds this year.
Yeah.
They're not going to be there. It's even to this day, one of those things. But at the same time, there's a new chapter.
Sure.
There's a new, and I learned so much from that deer.
Yeah.
I mean, I learned so much about myself in the persistence and how much patience does one guy have? How many days will you put in and let everyone go, and you're just going to focus on this one deer?
Mm-hmm.
So you teach yourself, you learn a lot about yourself, that deer is teaching you. And he was 6 years old when he finally got an arrow. And I think he lived more than a healthy, happy life. So I understand, I'm not sad that we're eating him.
Yeah.
Not at all. That's what he was put here for.
Right.
So
can we talk a little bit about that strategy? Because I think that's a really cool one. That's something that Jared and I think can relate to, is like really like investing ourselves in a deer for, year after year. What were some of your strategies on that thing in terms of like, even leading up to the years that you didn't kill him versus the year that you did kill him?
I think that what people have to understand is you're going to go through a time in your life, I don't care who you are, where you're going to step into that role. It's not something that you don't just go out and start hunting and immediately start targeting one particular deer. If you do, you're living in a whole different world than me. I mean, I grew up, like I said, on the East Coast, where I don't want to say if it's brown, it's down, but I was trying to kill a buck.
For sure.
But a spike was a trophy.
Yep.
When I moved to Arkansas, maybe a little bit bigger, forked horns, and it's got a basket rack of some sort. Man, that is. And if you go look at the pictures, the smile is big then as it is with any deer I've killed in Iowa.
Yeah.
So it's all in perception of where you are. But then one day, at least for me, it was that progression that, okay, now I bought my own piece of ground. We bought 47 acres that came with our house. And to kill my first deer on my own property, again, it didn't need to be big. That was just so cool. I sat there for what seemed like hours going, I can't believe I did this. I can't believe that I'm sitting here right now and this deer was on my property. I mean, if he had been 75 yards away, he'd have been on the neighbor's property. And it was just that he was here. And I can't put that into words for someone on what that felt like. But then as you start hunting more and more in Iowa here, and we have other ground that we're hunting, and all of a sudden you do see a deer that I saw him last year. Oh, and a definite, that's him. Here's a deer that's got a recognizable kicker. He's got it again. All of a sudden, you do have that opportunity. Could I try to shoot that deer? And do I have and then it becomes, for me, I've always referred to hunting as a chess game. And I love the game of chess. I'm not very good at it, but I love to sit there and spend my time. It's a mental process for me. And so with this particular deer, I passed him when he was 3. I saw him, but we were not hunting him at 4. Our goal is we try to shoot him at 5. Last year, he was 5 years old. I had another deer that I had also, and this one had a drop time. So I kind of was like, if I had to choose, we don't get to kill more than one deer during bow season. And so I said, I'm going to try to hunt this drop time buck. So I put my buddy on this deer that I shot this year. And I mean, I had him down. I felt like I did him. Like the strategy you talked about, scrapes have become a huge part of my repertoire, I guess. And I'll talk a little bit about rubs here in a little bit, because used to I would tell someone I don't pay any attention to rubs.
Mm-hmm.
Now I'm putting my own in. But this particular scrape is where I kept getting pictures of this deer. And so I go, same thing as I do every year. September, end of September, early October, he would show up and he started hitting that scrape, and our season starts October 1st. So I told my buddy, I said, look, you got about 4 or 5 days here where he's going to go in and out of that scrape. And as long as we got the right wind, I've got a blind now sitting, there's no trees. So I said, I have a blind sitting 25 yards from the scrape. And he's been there. Like if there was a 7-day period there, he was there 5 of the 7 days.
Wow.
Not always in the daytime. And what you had to get was that daytime movement.
Mm-hmm.
Did you say starting October 1st, David?
Well, he would and this is the crazy thing is I hunt another piece of ground that's 2 miles away. That's where the deer summered.
Mm-hmm.
If I didn't have one trail camera over there and see these pictures of him, he would be that deer that how many guys are out there going, I got a deer that's on my property, man. He's here all summer.
Gone.
Then they don't see him again till next summer.
Yeah. Yep.
Or you're the lucky recipient. You don't ever see this deer until rut starts. He'll be back. Sure enough, boom, he shows up.
Yeah.
I happened to be able to hunt the ground where this deer went and lived. That was 2 miles away, and where he would go to, where he would do his breeding at.
Wow.
Just dumb luck.
That's crazy.
And, it was again, I learned so much from him. But he would do it religiously, and he would stay until he dropped his antlers. I'd get to pick up his antlers, and then he'd go to the other place. And
Awesome.
I mean, and that's just his routine. So I used his routine against him in year 5. I was like, I'm putting a blind on this scrape. I'm banking that he's going to do what he's done the last 2 years. I put a buddy of mine in there and with a camera guy, and I was like, okay, wind's perfect. You guys should have a great chance of killing him here. Might not see him today, but you got 3 or 4 days here where this is about October 24th,
Perfect.
24th to the 27th is usually when we'll start seeing some of those daytime scrape hits.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And they're sitting there. They hadn't been there an hour and a half, and I get the text, just saw straight up. And I'm like, I'm expecting to see, made a good shot or whatever.
Yeah.
No shot. So that evening I get to them and I'm like, what happened? They said, well, he just came out of the timber and then cut down the edge of your food plot and walked on. No big deal. And I was like, yeah, be back there tomorrow. Long story short, no more straight up at that scrape. I had 2 other cameras north and south of there. He's showing up on those. I'm pretty sure those guys got busted that day.
Yeah.
I think he heard him in the blind or saw him in the blind or something. And one time,
That's it.
and he wasn't, and he was still there, but he was not coming to that scrape again. So this year I said, I'm not going to put anyone else on him. I'm going to try and do it myself. And I didn't go to the scrape only because I felt like I kind of figured him out a little more, and I had a couple stands that I wanted to work. And there's another scrape that he would hit occasionally. And sure enough, I saw him 3 times. I had 3 different encounters with him before I finally shot him the day that I shot him.
Wow.
And the day that I shot him, honestly, the only thing that got him killed was a new camera.
Yeah.
Because he pushed it right. I had about 4 to 5 minutes left of legal shooting light. And typically we're done about 10 minutes out.
Yep.
That, we just call it. And this particular camera, we'd only had it for 2 days, and I had one of the production guys bring it. And I kept asking him, are you good? And he said, I'm good. And I'm like, because I'm having a hard time with my naked eye seeing it.
Yeah.
But he's in a food plot.
Right.
That's huge. I mean, if I had to plug someone that helped me kill that deer, it would be Antler King.
Because he had him out in the open.
I kept him on that clover plot. I mean, he was there.
And you're in a hard-sided blind, right, David?
Not this time. This time I was in a stand.
You were in a stand.
I was going to ask, my next question was going to be, did you have like a lighted reticle? I know it gets pretty dark in blinds.
No, and honestly, when I drew my bow on him that evening, I was like, I'm just trying to see.
Yeah.
There's no way I'm going to be able to see my pins. And sure enough, because of the contrast with the green grass,
you could see
clover, I could see him perfectly. I'm like, so I had to ask one more time, are you sure you're on him? And he's like, we're good, shoot. And I'm like,
all right,
we're doing it, and he didn't even make it out of the food plot.
I would do the same thing, David, but that gives me a hilarious memory of one of our friends that shot a deer and claimed that they could, shot at a deer in Kansas, claimed that they could see the outline of the body and the corn pile behind it. So he's like, man, it was pitch black, but I could see the corn around his, and then I could make out his body. And so he called us in. He's like, come in. And before we got him out of the stand, I looked at he's like, I think I got him. And I see the arrow just buried in the corn pile. It's clean miss.
Yeah,
but
clean miss.
I was going to ask you, David, can you tell us a little bit more about like the location of some of those scrapes? And like, were they kind of bordering, bedding areas or more food sources? And
and most of the one that he was so religious to was in between 2 food plots. So not really in timber at all. It was kind of a little tree. There's a few trees there, but they're locust trees, short. You're not putting a stand in them at all. And it just is a travel corridor between the 2 food plots. And so these deer all hit that scrape.
These are 2 clover?
When I would go in, what's that?
You said 2 clover plots? I know at least one of them was.
One was clover. One was usually I'll put some type of annual in there. Usually I'm a big fan of like brassicas. It could be turnips, something like that. And so, and then I flip-flop next year I'll flip. The clover will be in the other one, and I'll go to and put the annual in the other one.
Very big in size?
No, quarter acre.
Each?
Quarter to a half acre. One of them's about a half acre. The other one's about a quarter.
Wow.
Okay.
About the largest plots that we put in are about an acre.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, now we do leave some,
Grain.
we'll leave some stuff once in a while, whether it's part of a cornfield, part of a soybean field, and we might leave 2 acres. Those typically are plots that we're looking to really nutritional value in the late season.
Yep.
And that's where we'll target our late season hunts.
Sure.
Dumb question, David. But in your area of that property and stuff, do you have a lot of ag farms and stuff right around you? Yeah.
Yeah. So there's that. So, sitting on corn or beans is really the same as everyone else,
Yep.
So when you introduce something that's really green and it grows really well, a lot of times you'll bring in a lot more deer until they'll actually eat you out of your food plot.
Interesting.
Because enough of them will get in there. So you got to make it count when it's time, it's time. And usually in November, not that many of them have hit it yet. So it can be prime. And what we find is these deer here in Iowa, they love the soft leaves from the brassicas, from your radish and turnip, almost as much as I think they love the actual vegetable itself.
Yep, that makes sense. You said, so this piece of ground's a little over 40 acres, right? That you killed him on. Did you have a pretty good idea of where he would call like maybe his core bedding would be?
Pretty good idea.
On your place or off?
No, he was just off. He would bed on the neighbor.
Gotcha.
But it's a heavy cedar thicket type deal, real steepy, rocky. When I say steep, I mean only 50 yards down, but steep.
Yep.
You're not getting in there without making some kind of noise.
Yeah.
I think and judging from where I would find his sheds, typically it seemed like I was finding them in a bed. And so that told me, this is where he's bedded. I found one of them last year during the Iowa Deer Classic. So I actually carried it up there and a lot of guys saw it. And the only reason I didn't find the other one is because I had to be at the Classic. I picked it up on my way. Karen picked me up. So soon as the Classic was over, I went right back. I walked one circle and there was the other one.
Wow.
Yeah.
So, I had a good idea of where he bedded. I had a good idea of kind of his core or his go-to places during the day. He fooled me once in a while. He would, and I don't know if he chased a doe somewhere and came out of nowhere, but most of the time I had a pretty good idea on where he was going and coming from. I don't run a lot of cameras. I mean, we run a lot of cameras across the different grounds we hunt, but I don't use trail cameras to try to check a pattern or anything like that. I just want to know the deer's in the area.
Interesting.
And so I would have him on these scrapes because then I know who's there.
Yep.
And he just got to be so consistent with it though. And he would always enter the camera from the same direction.
That helps.
So when you had your encounters there then, David, based on kind of your camera strategy, were those weather fronts or what were your timings to kind of say, hey, this is the best chance or I've got a chance of getting on them?
I think it was more the time of year than the type of day.
Yeah.
I mean, and that was, like I said, we hit that October 24th. I'm a huge fan of pre-rut.
Yeah,
Us too.
Agree.
Now, I didn't kill him until November 9th. And so then I was at the mercy of the does.
Yep.
That's where the food plot really becomes key because if I keep my does there and they're not going anywhere to feed, he's going to walk back in there. And we had already had 2 encounters with him, but neither time had he got downwind of us. So I didn't feel like we had bumped him at all. So I actually went back to the same stand 3 or 4 times before, I just was confident in it. And the wind, the biggest thing that I would tell anyone listening out there that wind.
Hold on, let me call my dad real quick.
Yeah, I don't care if you're hunting the biggest deer in the world and the wind's wrong, go hunt another good deer.
Yeah.
I mean, if the moment that you push it, you're going to screw it up.
Well,
I've done it. I've done it the wrong way many times.
I think we kind
I
of
did it this past year too. I had the same thing. Remember, I had the buck every day. It was coming in. It was corn pile in Ohio early season. And I pushed it. I hunted it on maybe 15, 20 degrees and a little more variable than it should have been. We didn't see that deer at that corn pile again.
When I was hunting that one in Columbus, I had that probably 150s 8 come in behind me. It was one of those cases, David, where he come through this cut into this food plot, and had he not, you would have never known he was there. And you watch his reaction when he catches the wind. He doesn't booger, he doesn't blow, he just turns and just right back to where he came from. And it's just like, how many of those deer, especially in a timber setting, how many of those big bucks catch you like that, and then they disappear, and you're like, I don't understand why I never saw them again.
Yeah.
I think it's
it happens a ton. Iowa's probably notorious for that because we don't have big blocks of timber.
Mm-hmm.
So it's heavy, thick. A lot of times you can't see them coming over 100 yards.
Mm-hmm.
So how many times are we, don't know what happened? In this particular case, though, I had kind of figured this deer even out to the point where I wouldn't rattle at him anymore. Because what's crazy is but here's the thing: the moment you think you figured one out, then they do something that totally. Because I had convinced myself never rattle at him again, never grunt at him. He's not a fighter; he's a lover, man. He is all about the does. And so I quit rattling at him, quit doing anything from the other encounters. And then the day that I shoot him, he's actually busted his brow tine off, which tells me he was fighting with somebody. So, but it just, this particular deer, I would tell you, he was locked into about 200 acres.
Wow.
Maybe less than that. But no one was ever seeing him from the road. My neighbor wasn't even seeing him, and he hunts that other property. He's like, I get an occasional trail cam photo of him, but nothing like what you're talking about. So he had and I think as they get older, they shrink their core area, and that can be to our advantage, or it can also be a disadvantage if you can't hunt there. Yeah.
I think it's a good example of, so often as guys who are passionate about deer, 365, we say, well, how can we take care of that deer, all year? Like, what can I plant in the summer to keep them here? What can I do in the fall to keep them here? And the fact is, you're not going to control that deer's behavior. There's a deer that just picks up and moves 2 miles during certain times of the year. It doesn't matter if you would have planted forage beans in those annual plots in the summertime, he still probably would have picked up and moved 2 miles to his other area.
Yep. I don't believe you were going to change. That was just ingrained in that deer. He was going back to where he was comfortable in the summer. I don't think I could have changed any. I don't even think he didn't even, he would make that move to where he knew. I do believe that deer have a breeding area.
Mm-hmm.
I believe that a lot of deer, as they, get to be 3, 4, 5 years old, they have an area they feel totally comfortable, even though there's probably just as many does half a mile down the road. But they know this area. Maybe they've whooped up on everyone else around there for a couple years, or they know so-and-so is getting old. I can't tell, you could speculate all you want. I don't know if that's right or not, but I do believe that they have areas they will go back to that they feel comfortable.
Yeah,
I agree. You'd say, David, even separate from like their fall range. So you'd say there's a summer range, a fall range, and a breeding core area.
I definitely think there can.
We would agree.
Mm-hmm.
I think so. It was also your comment about being able to hunt as deer on 2 different properties that were however far away was interesting, and also something that Jeremy and I've had the opportunity to observe this year. I guess more so me, where I've got a home farm that my parents own that we've hunted for years and years, and progressively it almost seems like it's gotten worse, or maybe my observations have just gotten more accurate to where these deer are just leaving after. There's definitely a shift come October. It seems like it starts to fall off. The first part of October is good. Second part of October into November is not good.
Yeah, gone.
But even beyond that, I've noticed that we'll hold 1-year-olds, 2-year-olds, some 3-year-olds, and I think that once they hit that age of like tipping point of maturity, there's just not enough room for them. Like, we don't have enough good cover. There's too much, call it social stress, or they want to be secluded. They don't want to be stacked in with a bunch of does or younger bucks, and so they kind of move off.
Mm-hmm.
And so I had the opportunity via getting some permission in area. Well, one was a lease. Jeremy and I leased a piece of like timber.
It looked
400 acre block of timber that was more of what I would call like an October rut piece.
Yeah,
where I expected a lot of these deer would move to. It was only 2 miles, mile and a half, and I got some permission on a few different types of property from a single landowner, kind of in the same area, and it was really interesting to watch some of these properties. My farm being one of them, and one of those permission properties specifically that are kind of hilly ag country, like with some acorns and stuff, a lot of good bucks, like in August, September, even into like mid-September. And right when those farms would start to dry up, these other ones would start to turn on. One of them being, okay, it's October, they're here. They've just moved in and they're here. Even another one of those was like what I would call one of these breeding.
Oh, yeah.
It was like we didn't see a deer until November 2nd, and there was 4 or 5 big shooter bucks that moved in right around that first week of November, and then it kind of fizzled out after that.
Yep.
Yeah, and I think that's what and that comes with time in the chair, time in the stand, that you start to figure out, you knew this looks like a November type farm.
Yep.
Would you have known what that looked like 10 years ago?
No, not even 2 years ago, David. I wouldn't have said. So like the biggest thing that we've taken this past year is like, hey, these different types of topography, the deer seem to use them differently. And so now, like in January, we're trying to figure out how to apply those our perceptions or knowledge about those properties to say, okay, on my farm that dries up after mid-October, we're going to hunt them hard the first week, even overpressure them, knowing that those deer are going to leave anyways.
Yep.
And
I think it comes back to like when you start thinking about, like David, in your case, like owning a piece of ground and killing a buck on it. Like, man, it's not always great to see a bunch of bucks running around your farm in August, because you can't kill them. You're not going to kill them. And, come October, November, they're gone. And I think a lot of people struggle with that. I mean, historically, people have struggled with that anyways, because if you're in any kind of ag country, right, where do you see your stands? It's on the field edge, right? And most of that is because, especially bow stands, is because early in bow season or late summer, right before bow season, they're watching all these deer, right, in these fields, right? It's the easiest place for observation. So that's where you set them up. All of a sudden, crops start changing, acorns start dropping. And next thing you know, these guys are sitting on these field edges and they're like, man, I don't see a damn deer. I was like, well, yeah, because they're in the woods behind you. I'm like, it's just that you don't migrate and move with those deer. And if you don't, you miss your chance.
I would say 90% of our stands are either on the edge of bedding areas or in between bedding and feeding. Other than when I put my own food plots in, because they're so small, I can dang near shoot across the entire thing, you know, and I've heard people call them kill plots or whatever, but it's basically now you've given them a destination point within their home range. They're not really going out to the 50-acre field, like they will spend all night when 25 of them are out there milling around.
Yeah.
So 100%, but I mean, and that's where I'm not a big field edge guy. And maybe it's because I know I don't have the opportunity to hunt them when they're out there. That's where I observe them. That's where I look at them. That's where we had another place where I used to have a trail camera. We had a rental piece of property. I mean, and it was 2 acres. So it was, wasn't a huntable really, but it bordered a cornfield. And so on the corner of the property, the gate went into the farmer's field. I put a camera on there. Every buck that I end up seeing at my place spent all summer there. It was the greatest greatest trail camera location ever. There's no deer ever going. I mean, just at night, they would come through they would walk through that gate to get in that cornfield. And so I might see 15, 20, maybe even 30 different bucks over the course of the summer. Wow. None of them live there. I mean, they lived there during the summer and then they would go on their merry way.
Yep.
And a third of them would end up at my place. A third of them may go, north or south, or they kind of scatter. So there's so much to learn about the whitetail deer that you could do a podcast 50 times a day and never cover it all.
That's the plan, at least.
Yeah. Well,
keep diving in the depths of it.
Yeah, that's what I love about it is there, and then I take a lot of what I do in the whitetail woods and I apply it to elk hunting. I apply it to turkey hunting.
Yep.
There's just so many things. But definitely for me, Warren is a lot of people write in too, but Warren's always asked me, are you sure whitetail's your favorite, Dad? Because Warren loves elk hunting.
Yeah.
And he was born in Montana. So I can see where that makes a little more sense. I was born in Virginia. So I think kind of where you grow up and what that thing is. And I love to go call elk, but there's something about a whitetail deer when they come walking through the leaves.
Yeah, I agree.
No,
and David, I think your perception of, like, you said it was back in your day when the women were like, you'd bring them along to hunt. And I don't know if it was so much your time as it was where you were born, because I have pictures of my cousins, aunts, uncles and they're from Montana. Where the men would go out and they would kill the deer and they'd bring them back, and all the women, I've got pictures of like my second cousins and stuff skinning all the deer and processing the deer with kids hanging on their front and back like infants, while the men would go back out and keep hunting.
That's funny, man. That's crazy.
But look at where it's come now. I mean, I know the women category is increasing tremendously. It's probably still not where it needs to be or where it should be, and I say that because I've been the defender of my own wife, people that write in and say, how can she go hunting with her nails painted, or she's obviously got makeup on. And I'm going, if that makes her feel good during the day, we'll make sure we set a stand so that they don't see her fingernails or smell her makeup.
Yeah.
And, I don't want anyone, I feel like that I would be doing a disservice to hunting if I didn't show other people what it felt like. Yeah. If I didn't put someone in a position where they could see it, feel it, smell it, that's wrong. That's so selfish, to hold on to it all by yourself, and so sharing it with my family has been a huge deal, both my boys and my wife.
Yeah. And speaking of women hunters, Darren and I were just talking before the podcast about Donice and that freaking mammoth of a buck she killed this year. Holy crap. Yeah. Well,
I'll tell you a funny story, and for those people that don't know Donice is the COO for Raise the Full Draw. She runs our nonprofit side, and her husband, she is in a house where it's not normal. And her husband, I love him to death, because I will always tell anyone, a good guy killed a good deer. Okay, no, a great guy killed a great deer. Yeah. Because he didn't kill a deer. He killed a 254-inch deer.
Whoa.
And it's just huge. To hear Nick tell the story, it's like you couldn't ask for a better person to have killed it. I mean, he had history with him. He had sheds with him, the time, the effort he put in. And so his wife has this huge, like 250 inches to live with. And so anyhow, when I heard that she killed a good deer, I texted her. I said, heard you killed a good deer. Send me a picture. She sends me a picture of this 180 plus inch deer. She says, I didn't think he was that big. I'm like, but I guess when it's 250 to 180, I would say that there's not a listener out there in your guys' world or in my world that wouldn't have shot this deer.
No, it's a toad.
It's absolutely a tank.
Yeah, it's a monster.
Absolute tank. And so she said, here, I'll send you a trail camera picture, because then you'll see why I didn't think he was that big. In the trail camera photo, he looks 200.
David's like, women.
Yeah, I was like, I don't know what to do here.
And Donice has been hunting for a long time, or not very long?
Oh, yeah. As far as I know, Donice has been working with us for 4 years now, 5 years.
Yep.
Yeah. She used to work for the DNR.
Yep. So she's been at it.
Yeah, I think she's been bow hunting for several years, and she's a go-getter. I mean, one of those deals where her and her husband take turns. You watch kids this morning, she's going hunting for 2-3 hours before going to work. And that's what it takes. The people that you see that are successful, not the ones that are just successful, but the ones that are successful year after year.
Yep.
One common denominator is they're putting in the time.
Yep. Yeah. That's crazy, man. How far is Donice from you?
About an hour, 45 minutes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And if you're wondering where, I would tell you like that direction.
Yes. That's what I said.
We have Google Maps. We'll figure out which way your house is oriented.
That's crazy, man. And then kind of use that as a transition point, because I think it's a big mission for you and Karen for sure is talking about Raised at Full Draw. And it's something because like I take my kids out, my kids use a crossbow or we go gun hunting and stuff, but mine and Jared's true passion and eventually what I'll pass on to my kids is bow hunting, right? I mean, it's what we live to do. And it's not that we wouldn't do something else, but I mean, again, try to describe that feeling to someone who doesn't bow hunt. It's too hard. Right. And so, I guess tell kind of the listeners here, what is Raised at Full Draw?
Oh boy, it's a whole podcast in itself, but I'll do it quickly. Basically 20 years ago, now 19 years ago, I got invited to a camp with kids, like 20 kids out in Montana. And I was the guy asked to come in and teach the kids how to blow an elk call. And that evolved into them inviting me back the next year because the kids had a ball. To my kids were too young to go, but I brought them along. Karen would go and just watch our kids. Then it got to be, well, they fit right in, even though they were so young. Other kids would take them. And long story short, 20 years later, we now live in Iowa. And we now host 6 different camps in 6 different states where we take 50 kids. We keep them for 4 days, 3 nights, all in tents. We feed them, we house them, but we put a bow in their hand if they don't have their own. And then they actually learn hunter education through our camp. They're actually certified by the states that we're in with their bow hunter education, but when it's all said and done. But I think, Jeremy, what we're doing for those kids is, I don't know about you guys. When I went through hunter ed, it was like the driest,
Yes.
I mean, you sat there about to fall asleep.
Yes.
And then the guy's like, go to this page. And then you take the test and you get a 94%. How many of those kids are actually going to go out and want to hunt? Only the ones that got a family like you and Jared, you know, that someone to take them. And how many kids are out there that don't have that? Can we throw them in a tree stand, put them in a situation where there's a big elk target? I mean, I don't think I ever got to shoot a 3D target till I was 20 some years old. And we'll have 25 to 30 of them set up for these kids, along with static ranges, bows set up. They can bring their own bow. They don't have to. We have everything in place for them. But these kids are walking away. I mean, they're in it. They got a little feeling of it. And then we throw some competition in there to give them that little bit of a heart racing, rushing thing. But I think the thing that really hooks them is because they're spending the night, they meet some other kids.
Right.
And they meet that kid that grows up in one of your guys' families that hunts too. And they start, it's not uncommon to go down into the tent area, with 50 kids, there would be 30 tents down there. And you'll hear them talking at night. And now sometimes they're talking about the hot chick in the far tent or, that kind of stuff. But other times they're talking about, my dad killed this deer, and he was doing this. And my dad doesn't agree with David. My dad says that, David's an idiot, that you should just pick up a rifle and shoot him right in the head. I don't care what they're talking about.
Yeah.
If they're talking about hunting, they're talking about hunting.
Yep.
And so I think as much as we think we're teaching, a lot of it is learned through just the other kids that are there with them.
Well, and that's it, man. And we get it on this podcast a lot, especially recently, in that, we'll say things, whether it's Crossbows or whatever, right, to spark a discussion. And like, people don't have to agree with us on it, but just start talking about it. Because the problem is there's no progression as a community, as a hunting group, if we don't talk to each other and at least have open discussions about it. And I feel like we used to be really good at that. And then I don't know what happened, but we got really bad at it pretty fast. We harbored resentment or bad feelings because you hunted private and I hunted public, or you used a crossbow and I didn't, or whatever it might be. And then we stopped talking about it. And it doesn't mean that everybody needs to agree, but at least have a dialogue again.
And I think social media has hurt us in the fact that it's helped in many ways because you get information instantaneously. When Nick Peterson killed a 250-inch deer, within a few hours, it was, had millions of views. And that's great because it's advocating something great. But then when you watch the bashing that goes on, it was killed on a high fence farm. And so people are leery about talking about anything, and you just got to have broad shoulders when you're a hunter, because it's hard enough to fight the anti-hunters.
Yep.
And then to do it in such a positive way that I don't ever want to push away the person that's not an anti-hunter, but's not a hunter.
Mm-hmm.
That's who we need on our side.
Yep.
Well, I mean, there's been what we teach the kids at camp is the 10-80-10. 10% of us are hunters, 80% don't care one way or another, and 10% are anti-hunters. We're not changing their mind.
Mm-hmm.
That's okay. But if we could sway some of that 80% to come to the hunting side, even if they don't ever pick up a bow or a gun, but they at least accept it now, they understand that, okay, wait a minute, maybe we do need to be hunting wolves. Maybe we do need to be killing grizzly bears. Maybe it's not exactly what Disney showed me on, on whatever movie. You got to have big shoulders to carry that. And then if you're having to carry big shoulder or having to have big shoulders to carry the fight amongst your own peers,
mm-hmm.
Because I don't get to hunt there, man, it's just, we need to stick together, and we need to work together. And I don't know who's the advocate for it. I hope that someday when I pass, that will be the legacy I leave, is you won't find anyone that was more passionate and cared more about hunting itself than David Holder.
Yeah.
And that's all I want to do is leave it for my grandkids that they still get to do it.
Yep.
So,
well, I think it's, so Jared and I had an interesting talk, I don't know, a couple podcasts ago. We were talking about some of the numbers that U.S. Fish and Wildlife put out from hunting numbers in 2004 to 2019, I think it was. In a lot of the states and overall, it indicated some increase there. And I know that a lot of states have put a ton of thought process behind, a recruitment, retention, reactivation, right? The R3 movement. I'm very adamant about the recruitment side. That young generation, my kids who are 6 and 9, getting them involved with hunting, understanding hunting, hopefully them talking to their friends who aren't hunters to get them at least intrigued about it, right? That 80% that you're talking about who may not be hunters, but they're not anti-hunters. The reactivation and the retention is an interesting spot, because I think that when you start to look at what maybe even the COVID in the last couple of years has done to some of the hunting populations in different states, it starts to open up a dialogue, at least, of, are there too many hunters in certain situations? And I don't mean that as like forever there's too many hunters. That's why I'm so adamant about the recruitment with younger kids, but just in general, for the access that is available and the resource that is available, are there too many hunters?
The nuance that's like revealed itself as we've started to have those conversations is maybe not just literally are there too many hunters or are there not enough hunters, but like to look at, for instance, crossbow hunters being allowed to hunt during the general archery season is going to create a situation where you have a lot more hunters in the woods for a much broader, or a lot more time, just in general. And so you may have the same number of hunters, but the resources being imposed on that much more, and different people taking advantage of different times of the season are experiencing that much more hunting pressure, for instance.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I think, I want to let you chime in on this, David, but also if we think about our public lands, right? Whether it's state-owned land or federal lands, the West is one thing, right? But let's say, everything Midwest and East Coast.
Whitetail states.
Yeah, whitetail states. There is a finite amount of public land available, right? And so with that, it might be able to house 600 hunters in whatever, 10,000 acres, but is the experience of those people hunting that public land a positive one at that point? Or is there so many people on there that the experience, especially for newer hunters, is just miserable, basically?
And I think, you guys bring up two really good topics, and I look at it as two different ways. One, I say this all the time to landowners. If you let 50 people in here, you're not going to kill 50 deer.
Right.
If you let 5 people in here, you might kill 50 deer if those people are really good at what they're doing. You put too much pressure on, and then no one has a good experience.
Yep.
With that same thing being said, though, that's where I believe that not only should we be educating people to become better hunters or to become hunters, but if we were just educating the across the board people, meaning the people that don't hunt, they don't care one way or another, how many of them are landowners?
Right.
How many of them would possibly open a piece of ground if they were approached the right way? Because I can tell you still to this day, if someone told me today, I can't find any places to hunt anywhere I live, I would tell you, I'll take you on that bet any day of the week.
100%.
Because
Me too.
If you give me enough time and I knock on enough doors and I treat people with respect and I look them in the eye and I shake their hand and I offer to work for them because I want to have a good experience, and I come to them knowing that my experience is totally reliant on their property or what they have, then if we could educate those people or get them involved in hunting in some way, not into hunting, but just know what it's like, or that people have gone through something that they have learned that, because I can't tell you how many places too you run into and they're like, I used to let hunters and now I don't.
Right.
And almost every one of them, it's because of a bad experience, whether it's trash, whether it's their shooting, whether it's, knocking on their door at 4 a.m, just crazy stuff that you would never think that people would do. They shut it down. So I feel like, it's almost, I look at Hunger Games, and I don't know the girl that was shooting the bow, and then all of a sudden everyone was buying bows.
Mm-hmm.
Imagine if we could reach somehow across the world of filmmaking and expose hunting in a completely different light. How many people would go, wait a minute, that's not what I've been seeing or hearing for all these years.
Mm-hmm.
And because I can tell you right now, I have relatives that have told me that they've put money into saving the wolf or the grizzly bear. And I'm trying to explain to them,
right,
when you live there, you realize there's more of them than what you're hearing about. That's not it's just, and it's not that person's fault. They don't know any different.
Sure.
They couldn't know any different. They've only heard one side of the story.
Yeah. I think it's, when you start to, like, I've encountered some landowners who, and we've leased from some of these guys who aren't hunters and have property, and they almost hate deer. They're like, oh man, they'll, shoot every one of them. They eat this, they eat that. My daughter hit one with the car. Like, and it's it's almost too drastic to where it's like, well, listen, like, at the same time I want to hunt them. Like, I love deer. Like, I'm invested in that animal. I respect that animal. I want to conserve for that animal. But it is usually a bad apple along the way, whether it was them or their neighbor or the neighbor down the road who, somebody shot and almost hit their house or whatever it is, and it just shuts it all down, closes it all down. And that's the story almost everywhere that you turn, I think.
And I think we as hunters got to police ourselves, and that's where, you got to ask you. And I used to make the same mistake. I'd make the same statement: treat this property like it's your own. Well, you go to their house and see that maybe that's not what you want.
Maybe that's not the best situation there.
Yeah. So I try to tell, but treat this like that guy that guy owns it, and you want to be able to come back.
Yep.
And so I don't know I definitely think hunting needs a PR campaign. I think that there needs a public relation to the highest level. I love Ted Nugent. Ted Nugent is probably one of the biggest spokespeople out there for hunting, but Ted Nugent is also one of the most polarizing people that we see in the industry as well.
Yeah.
So can he get that soccer mom to come over? Certainly he could, until he shows Santa Claus with all his dead reindeer, and then we've lost that.
Yeah.
Right.
So, but the guy's got the right heart. His heart's in the right place. He's doing it for the right reason.
Yep.
I agree with that.
I just think that we got a bunch of people out there that, and I hate to think that it's left up to the celebrities, so to speak, that are on these outdoor networks. It doesn't have to be. It could be, the guy in your backyard that goes up and helps a neighbor.
Yep.
And that opens a door. But
well, just like you said, David, I think going door to door, I completely agree with you. In fact, I've had a ton of success knocking on doors and just being friendly with people, introduce myself as a neighbor. Like you said, showing them respect. And it's funny how quickly it seems like people will cling to your genuine passion for like what you're asking permission for, And so like for me to go knock on a door, to show them respect, to show them, how passionate I am, or what I'm willing to do to get access to their property. Like, it seems like once they start to understand like how much you love it, they're like, oh, this is like, I've never seen anybody this passionate about anything. Like, and it starts to get them fired up. Yeah. And so like, this PR campaign that you're talking about, I agree with. It'd be awesome if we had that on a macro scale, but like, I like to think that like I've had, and I bet you guys have had some really good interactions that impacted landowners just by our interactions, and then respecting their land after the fact, and like sharing the experience by showing them shed antlers that you found, or the buck that you were able to harvest, or that your kids were able to harvest. That's a cool aspect of it.
We have landowners that we've hunted on that we're still friends with today, and we don't live in Montana anymore, or even in Arkansas. I'll go down to see a buddy of mine in Arkansas. I haven't lived there in over 20 years. And I swing over to see a guy, now he's passed on. It's his kid now, and he's like, oh yeah, I remember when you killed that deer, and all we can try to do is be good stewards and keep, proposing that and keep that going. I just wish we could figure out a way to do it on a larger level so we could reach more.
And I think some of it starts with the hunting community internally, right? Because for whatever reason, there's this real polarizing discussion, battle, I don't know how you want to lay it out, between private land and public land hunters, right? And it's a weird thing because at the end of the day, like, we all love to hunt. And some of it is, maybe the public land guy resents the private land guy because he's got this access and the food plots or whatever. And it comes down to a weird thing because just like we were talking about with your deer earlier, like, that deer doesn't know that, government-based boundary. Like, he's on my private land, he's on that public land bedding, and he comes here to feed, and he comes through here. Like, and ultimately, there's a chance for anybody to kill him, right? I mean, that's why it's the state's resource and not my buck or your buck. But what's weird about it is, how do we as a group understand that, ultimately access is limited, right? And the amount of land that's hunting available is limited. And if the deer are feeding on a property that I own, but they're bedding on the public, like, we're in a cooperation here, right? And I think that's where some of these guys maybe get frustrated from a public standpoint, including Jared and myself, where, we've gone on public just as early as this past fall, and it's like everywhere we've scouted, everywhere we've been, it's just loaded with guys. To the point where, that we didn't have any other options but to hunt it, but it was not a great situation. Like, none of us were going to be successful, and if we were, it was for a buck that we weren't after, a 2-year-old or whatever. But it was just, there was so much pressure there that it's like, how is anybody finding this enjoying to a point? And then how do you regulate it? Because it's not like in Iowa where there's a draw-based system. It's Illinois over the counter where if it's public, it's open. Go for it.
And I think you brought up I don't know if it's the answer or the point to it, though, in that you get all these people and they're all hunting public ground. I used to hunt public ground, and I would be a flat liar if I didn't say back then, I wish I was hunting across the street where that place was private.
Yeah.
Because I could tell the difference, the people there were just so many things. I could not play that chess game with the deer. I was having to play a chess game with the human being as well.
Right. Exactly.
And sometimes, unfortunately, some human beings are going to cheat. They're going to do things that's not even the fair way to do it. A guy messing up someone else. How many guys do we know, or have you ever had a trail camera stolen or a tree stand stolen?
Yeah.
That's not a hunter. That's a thief.
Yeah.
That's all he is, but he's disguised as a hunter when he does that. So you only hit that. So you can only take so much of that frustration. I think you lead into a great place to kind of maybe clear up something as far as the filming world. One reason why you don't see a lot of the TV crews and everyone out there hunting in the Western states on public ground, it costs us more to hunt public ground than it does if we pay an outfitter or pay for a trespassing piece of property. Because many of the states, Montana, Wyoming, a few others that I can think of, charge you for state ground, national forest ground, BLM ground, all by the day, or by the week, and you pay for all that. I mean, and it's crazy that because they treat you as though you're coming in to film, a big movie.
Like a Hollywood cinematic.
Yeah, like Forrest Gump is going to come through there with 200 people. They don't treat you as it's just two buddies out there and one guy's packing a camera. And so that's what's kind of led us more away from, at least on the Western side of the public stuff. But I can just say I used to be that guy, man, but I couldn't hold a grudge against someone who was hunting public or private because they worked hard in some other way to earn the money to buy that piece of ground or to lease that piece of ground. They've done nothing any less than the guy hunting on public ground. They just put more effort into making money to be able to go do it, because that's what it inevitably came down to, or has nothing to do with money. And it goes to what you said, Jared, and it's that they took the initiative that this weekend they weren't going to go play a game or Xbox or whatever. They're going to go knock on doors, or guess what? Maybe they're going to put on a pair of leather gloves and go help some dude with a fence that has nothing to do with their life.
Yep.
They don't want to give up that time. Sorry, then you're going to still hunt the same piece of ground you're going to be mad at that 4 other people are going to show up that morning.
Yeah. Which is why I hate trespassers, because I feel like that's worse than a thief, in my opinion. Like, if I've worked hard to buy a piece of ground.
Oh, you can't steal unless you're trespassing.
Well, still on public land. Still my tree stand or my camera on public land.
Yeah, but you're not supposed to leave it there anyways.
Yeah, technically. But yeah,
we agree with everything you're saying there, David.
Yeah, it's just a weird, and I guess where I'm going with that, and I don't know, Jared and I have kind of danced around this discussion, and we don't want to be the guys saying like we don't need more hunters, right? But when I look at a piece in certain states, Iowa's different, Kansas is different with draw points, but like some of these over-the-counter states, Pennsylvania and Ohio even, you know, I look at a piece of ground, and I've got ground in Kentucky that borders public, right? And I'm looking at that piece of ground, and I'm saying, okay, like absolutely people are going to hunt this, but like it can only hold so many people before eventually those people just push all the deer onto my property because there's nowhere else to go. Like the deer are just going to avoid this guy and move 50 yards away and bed down here when this guy's 75 yards away. And so it's a weird situation to like, how at some point is there a threshold or a cap or something there in terms of how many people we can stuff into certain public areas, again, mostly on the Midwest, East, whitetail-based states. And I don't know.
Again, I don't know what the answer is other than I still say that if hunting was looked at in a different light, you would open up more ground.
I agree with that. I think that's where we have
that's
to go.
Interesting. We haven't really talked about that.
That's what you have to do because, again, the state, because of the privatization of this country, not just with hunting and everything, but how people are buying land, including ourselves, the state isn't going to add a ton of land back into the public open, hunting market. That's why there's plans in place from, the Department of Natural Resources or Game Commission to allow private land to be open to public, right?
That's really interesting. I'd be really curious to know like what percentage of huntable ground or of quality ground in some of these different states is tied up in like someone not willing to give permission because of, for some reason, their perception of hunting, their experience with
hunters.
Assume it's more
than we think.
So personally, most of the no's that I get when I ask permission is because somebody else is already hunting there.
Mm-hmm.
And that's Pennsylvania, Ohio, high hunter number
Illinois,
states.
Yeah.
I would think that probably is more than the amount of people that are, it's because it's already getting hunted, but I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know either. I don't know what it is, but I know it can never hurt to open more ground.
Yeah.
Or even if it's not publicly, even if that person just let 5 more guys hunt there because they were a group of guys that approached in the right way, treated it the right way.
Yeah.
That just took 5 guys off of public ground or off of another farm or whatever.
Yeah.
So I don't know what the number is. I do know that I agree with you, Jared, that more of it is that there's already someone hunting there, but there are times when someone just says no and they don't give you a reason. And typically I can tell that person's not letting anyone hunt, or you've identified pieces of property that you never see a truck there.
And that's the person you want to get permission on the next one over.
That's the one. Well, and I think it is interesting, like even when you talk about my nephew hunts here. He may be there opening day gun season. That's one day out of how many huntable days on that property, and then it'd be great to know, like in retrospect, like how many deer have you harvested on this property in the last 5 years? It's probably low. Versus some places where, there's 9 or 10 guys hunting 400 acres, right? I get that. But I bet when you talk to most of these people and they say, well, yeah, so-and-so hunts here, it's one guy for one weekend a year, probably.
Well, I understand wanting exclusive permission because, like you said, you don't want your stuff getting tampered with.
Sure.
At that point, you're competing with people to
But is
some
it
degree.
exclusive, or is it mainly like, I just know I'm the landowner and I know so-and-so hunts here every once in a while because I let them? That doesn't mean that hunter needs exclusive permission or wants exclusive permission. It's just, I gave so-and-so permission already. Well, hell, that guy might have 5 or 6 other farms. He doesn't even hunt it.
And we can police ourselves in that as well. Like we have some places that we do hunt that are permission based, right? Someone just gave us permission, but someone else is hunting there. First thing that I try to do is get phone numbers from the other guys that are hunting there.
Yeah.
Hey, when are you going? Couple of farms, we've even got it to where, because we have to have 2 tree stands for every stand in order for a camera guy. Man, I asked this guy, you got your stand in the right location. I never hang a stand like 10 yards from you or something like that. I said, but would you mind if we put one behind your stand? And he was like, absolutely. Because then I could bring my kid who doesn't hunt yet. He was young. So now you had a way for him. So, but at the same time, there are times when we want to go hunting, we call, he's going there, go somewhere else.
Yep.
And does that mean that I need to go knock on another door? Maybe. you know, and that's okay. Man, the one that gets me the most though, and we all do it at some point, is you pull up somewhere or you drive by somewhere and there's a truck already parked there. Freaking kidding me. Someone already, dude, he's another hunter.
Yeah.
He's just doing what if you'd have got here 30 minutes earlier, you'd have been the one that he's cussing going, damn it. What's he doing here?
Yeah. We've run into some cussers this year for sure.
Yeah. I think the intrigue around opening up more ground is something that I don't hear many people talking about.
Well, dude,
right? I mean, it's just not being said.
People are terrified to ask permission.
It's because everybody
would rather pay $35 an acre, to not have that interaction. They want to avoid it altogether. Right. If you would just realize, if you could just go, dude, if you go to 5 doorsteps, I know it's different in every area, and you're respectful and you're not in camo and you just are clear about your intentions, like, dude, chances are one of those people are going to let you hunt.
I mean, if you want to blame social media for something, first of all, as a society, we've always been introverts, right? You asked people in the 70s, 80s, and 90s what their biggest fear was. It was public speaking.
Yeah.
Right? Nobody wanted to do that stuff. And now you add in the fact of social media on top of it. Nobody likes conflict. Nobody wants they want conflict from behind a keyboard, but they don't want to do it face to face. And so,
well, even more than that, dude, they don't want engagement. They don't want to stand face to face with people.
And what's happened in the last 2 years is we can't even have a meeting. I got to talk to David on TV right now.
Well, and I can tell you that what Jared just said though, that is one of the best parts of Raised at Full Draw. We do a whole role play. These kids will actually cross a posted sign, and then we come out of the woods, and I play one of the guys. Haven Dolder shows up, and, and I wish I had a photo here to show you what some of it looks like, because we don't dress right. But anyhow, we approach them, and you watch these kids, and what you're seeing when you see the kids, you're seeing their parents.
Right.
This is what their parents, and man, they're no eye contact. Don't know how to shake your hand. They don't even know what to say. Smart mouths, they think they're being funny. Sometimes they're doing it because they know, this is a role play thing, but there's other times when you could tell that this is just how they would have responded. And then, and getting these kids to understand, do you know how far it would go if you had just said, hey, my name is David Holder, and I was, hunting over here and I shot a deer, went on your property. I know in Iowa, you don't have to ask. In Iowa, if you lay your weapon down, you can go on anyone's land as long as you have a blood trail.
Interesting.
And it's very interesting, but what's the right thing to do? The right thing is still to go find
them and ask.
And just say, hey, and most of the time I can tell you, and I've been on both sides. I've been the one that someone, has come to my house. I'll go with you. I have a black lab that tracks deer. If we need it, we can put Dan on the deer and we'll find him. Now, would I possibly invite them back or something like that? For sure. As opposed to me driving down the road, see someone walking through my timber. I'm like, what the heck? Mm-hmm. Whether they're doing the right thing or not. Now I'm like, what are you doing here? We've already started with a confrontation.
You're in a bad spot.
Yeah, that's invaluable. David, I can remember now that you mention it, going with my dad and my uncle when they were like asking permission. And like how valuable that was for me as a kid, just to be there and witness. I can remember pushing we were on this guy's doorstep, and my uncle had knocked. He was getting ready to ask for first day of gun or something up near Meadville, Pennsylvania. Mm-hmm. And I leaned on one of their brick walls and I pushed off a big brick. And my uncle made a big. He's like, "You're gonna ruin our chances of getting," or whatever. And so I learned, how to act with these people's doors, and how to.
Well, I mean, you say that, and it's funny. I had a situation in Pennsylvania. I was probably 14, 15 years old, and there was a group of us. We were out doe hunting during gun season or something, and I had shot a doe back on public, and we were coming back to the camp, and just kind of the same trail that we normally were. And it had been recent, within the year or two, that somebody had posted a bunch of land. And it was one of those situations where if you went to the courthouse, it wasn't legit. He just basically posted a post. Still, we minded the signs, right? And cut around. And we had got on the other side, and this guy comes blowing up out of these woods. And I mean, you looked in the eyes and the guy wasn't right in the head. And I mean, here he is standing with a loaded weapon. And I mean, he's cussing up a storm that we've shot this deer and trespassed on this property and stuff. And I remember being with, you know, my grandpap and my uncles and my dads and like watching them diffuse the situation to where, like, I don't know, if I would took off running, he could have shot me for all I know.
Yeah.
And it's those kind of situations that, you know,
so valuable.
Yeah, you have to be put in because you don't know how to respond to that. In the same way as, like, I've caught people on my place and have trespassed, and, you know, like, I'm not happy about it, but I'm also not going to come at them crazy with a gun in my hand type of thing. And so it's just, if you're not put in those situations, like, kids today just don't understand how to respond to that stuff.
Nope. And I agree with Jared. I mean, when you say, you know, valuable lesson, because to me, it goes way beyond the woods.
Yeah.
You've now taught someone how to handle themselves in a job interview.
Exactly.
You've now taught someone how to handle something in a situation in a bar where maybe we don't end up in a fight and someone spending the rest of the time in jail because they did something, they made just one quick, you know, I mean, so it can go. And that's what I love about hunting, is because hunting leaves you alone, and it's up to you and who you're with maybe to make a decision, but that it's you and that no trespassing sign. You get to make the determination whether you want to take that risk or not.
Yeah.
You know, and so if we could, I would rather have the kid that makes the decision not to cross it being the one that's following you down a New York street.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that's the kind of things that I think that hunting can instill in kids, which then in turns into, you know.
Well
adults.
said, man. Dude, we've all had that, you know, stare face to face. It's just you and that no trespassing sign.
Yeah. Well, and I think a lot of it too is, you know, when I was growing up in 90s and early 2000s, you know, my dad will credit the fact that I stayed out of trouble because I was a hunter and a fisherman. And that, like, if I wasn't as committed to that, though I did like all kinds of sports, like I would have been in a world of shit probably at some point. Yeah. And it was just because of the area I grew up in and just the nature of who I was with some of my friends. But like, I didn't go down some of those bad paths because it was like, well, yeah, dude, I'm not going to do that. I'm getting up at like 5 to go bow hunt tomorrow morning.
Yeah.
And people laugh at it, but it's like, I was like, no, seriously. Like, I know a lot of people, when you talk to them, they'll say, yeah, that kept me out of a lot of stuff that I probably would have got into. Because what else? We say it all the time, dude.
That's how I justify all the money I spend on it to my wife. It's like, hey, I could be.
We seriously say it all the time. We're like, if you don't hunt, like, what do you do, man?
I know.
Like, what else do you do?
It's hard to imagine all the brain space we've allowed hunting to occupy, and like the time, the financial resources, like all these things that we pour into like this passion. It's hard to imagine somebody that doesn't do that. And like I've said in the past, I know it may be short-sighted to just say who doesn't hunt, but it's like, man, if you don't have some kind of something like that you're as passionate about that as we are about bow hunting, it's like, what are you doing with that brain space? It's hard to fathom.
Yeah.
They're skiing, they're riding a motorcycle, you know, they do ballet, they knit. Everyone's got something.
Which is fine.
You know?
Yeah. As long as you have something, you should have something.
You got to have something though. Cause I think that's that, you know, in our youth, especially when you didn't have something to do, that's when you found yourself in a bad situation. Cause then you're just like, well, I got all this time. I'm going to go do something.
See, for me, mine goes even farther than that, Jeremy, cause I could honestly, and Karen would stand here and tell you 100%, hunting saved my life. Because I grew up in a family where a lot of alcohol, a lot of but also all my family made good money, so they could afford it. Well, making money and alcohol usually leads to bad things, wrecked trucks and all kinds of stuff. And eventually, you know, I'm the sole survivor basically on one side of my entire family. But I recognized at an early age that I didn't want to go down that path.
Mm-hmm.
And hunting was what I loved. And I went from riding in a truck, watching people shoot deer out the window of the truck and not care, you know, throwing beer cans in everything that maybe that's why I'm so passionate. Maybe that's why Raised at Full Draw is such a big deal for me, because I had all the bad influences. They're your family. You love them, man.
Mm-hmm.
You got to. But at the same time, I had to stand up to them at one point and tell them I'm not doing this anymore.
Yeah.
I don't want to be a part of this. I don't want to live like this. And then I found there was another side of it. They had never even seen the side of hearing a deer grunt, you know, or a turkey gobble. And actually that just wasn't in their thing, you know? And so I'm that passionate probably because I've been on that other side. And that's a hard thing to admit. I've done it in episodes where I've said, you know, you ever poached a deer? For sure. Never got caught. I was a kid. You know, did I ever go across that no trespassing sign? Sure did.
Yeah.
Yep.
You know, and,
I've had the exact same experience.
Yeah.
And now, all you can do is look back and go, I shouldn't have done that. And I want to show someone why they shouldn't, catch them before they get to that spot.
I think that's a good point. Cause I mean, like I have too. I mean, I've I've always joked of like, sometimes you don't recognize what's the wrong until you do it type of thing. And, I've been in that position before. But I also think it's put me in a position now to really respect kind of the way I do things today than how I did them when I was younger. Like, yeah, you talk about the trespassing thing. When I would hear somebody or approach, I was a cross country and track runner. I was gone. Mm-hmm. You weren't. I mean, I'm serious. I was on the other side and I was gone fast. Or my wife probably hates me for it, but my mom knows it. I was quick to come up with the right story to get me out of the jam. Yeah. And
this isn't Michael Burns' property.
I was like, oh, but she gave me permission. I'm so sorry. And you find yourselves in it, but it's also because like as a dad now, like I joke with my kids about some of those stories, but I'm also like, listen, you do that, you're in deep shit.
Yeah, I think that just based on what you were saying there, David, like the trespassing is one thing, disrespecting somebody's land and stuff, but like killing an animal is a big deal. Mm-hmm. And I think like, I've been on some of those, late night, coon hunting trips and like, where it's like, hey, there's deer in the field and, things happen and you kill animals. And like, I was with a group of guys and relatives of mine that were just like, that's what we're doing. We're killing shit, and I was like, that was kind of like my exposure. Granted, I had some good influences like in my uncle and stuff, but during that I was like, man, this is like kind of the same. Like we're still killing stuff, but like it didn't feel right.
Right.
And then after I realized like what we were doing, like I had so much remorse for killing an animal, especially now that I respect them so much. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if that's the reason for it, but like now coming full circle, it's like, man, I have so much respect. It's like, it really affects me when I kill any animal. Like it maybe sounds, I've heard some guys say it where it's like forced and it's like, this is a majestic animal and stuff, but it's like, dude, it's
a powerful thing.
It's powerful. Yeah. To even like, dude, there was a time I used to like, I would swerve to hit a rabbit on the road or whatever. And I was like, oh, cause that's how we did it. We're killing shit. But I just can't, it's not in me anymore. And I know that that's not right. And so I don't know.
Well, you have to go through the wrong, I think, to identify the right fit. And you know it too. I mean, you know when things, you get that feeling. And if you're young, you're going around, it's peer pressure, right? You're around with the crowd, especially if they're older and you're just kind of going along with it. But at some point, and you recognize what's right and what's wrong. And we do it for all things in life, not just hunting, but hunting especially and harvesting an animal is it's why we do what we do now versus we're still driving around drinking beer in the truck type of thing.
And I think that even creates room for conversation and I agree, David, as hunters, I want us to all be on the same page advocating for hunting as a right. But the fact that I respect animals so much, I think there are things that are legal within hunting that don't afford the animal the respect that I want to give them, that I choose to, whether that's shooting a deer at 600 yards on the run with a rifle type of deal, or certain types of group hunts, or even throw some nuances of crossbow type stuff. It's all very situational. And I'm not against any one of those things for what it is, but I want to hunt in a way that gives animals, especially these mature bucks that we're hunting.
I'll give you a great example.
The most respect possible.
Deer drives, right? And David, you grew up on the East Coast. Like I grew up from the moment I was 9 years old before I could hunt, I was putting on deer drives for people. To the time I graduated college, I was killing deer on deer drives. And it's legal in most states. It's legal
and not inherently wrong. I'm not against deer drives.
In fact, it was that I would get out of my tree stand at 7:30 a.m. on opening day at gun season and be like, cool, all right, I'm done sitting. Let's go put drives on. Yep. Right? That's just how I was raised. And I loved it. And it was one of the things that bonded my deer camp, my family, was like a successful deer drive at the end, right? And now, as a landowner and stuff, I sit there and I despise them in a lot of cases. And it's a weird thing because I have nothing against people who do them, because I still watch my old videos and I'm like, man, that was fun as hell. But it's just because I've evolved as a hunter.
And, and that's a big issue here in Iowa because they're 100% legal and there's no ramifications on the size of them or anything. And being that we have a television show and that we have thousands and hundreds of thousands of people following our social media pages, we've not always been able to speak our mind, I guess. We just but this year I lost a friend in a deer drive that got shot and killed.
Holy cow.
And I said, no more will I keep my tongue, and that is, again, Jared, I agree with you. I'm not against the hunter. I'm totally against the technique.
Yep.
Not because of the legal standard, but because of the
safety
factor.
100%.
Period. Both for the deer and the other people that are a part of it. I had a landowner that I hunt on. So you want to get into a really weird situation, get into this one. I have permission to hunt on a guy's place that he's allowed us to bow hunt. He has permission for him and his group to push another piece of ground that I hunt. Well, this year, that landowner gave me he wanted someone to have the control of it. He doesn't lease it to us, but he just said, put up signs for me. And then if anyone calls, they're going to call you. I don't want to deal with it. You can bow hunt here, gun hunt, whatever. But if anyone wants to hunt, they go through you. The landowner that I hunt on his ground calls me and says, hey, we want to go in here and do the same drive that we've done for the last 30 years. And I told him no. And I said, here's what I will let you guys do. If one or two of you want to go down in there, it's a 150 acre piece of ground and sit and hunt deer, you're more than welcome. But I'm not going to advocate the fact that a group of guys, there's only one time in life that people should be facing each other with guns, and that's war.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. That when we're at war is the only time that we should be pointed guns at each other. And I said, I can't do it, man. I just lost a friend opening day of gun season this year. It happens every year someone gets shot, but this time, this one hit home.
Yeah.
And so, are we going to create some enemies? Maybe so, but I want people to understand. I agree with Jared. It's not that I'm speaking against hunting in any way, but I am speaking against 40 guys lined up walking toward each other, 20 on one end, 20 on the other. Yeah. And I think they're just, and you can say we're being as safe as possible. The weapons are just that much better.
Oh, agree.
So bullets are carrying farther and things like that. So, at some point you got to say, maybe this isn't the best way to do this.
It's a sensitive subject because it's one of those things, hunting is so emotional as it is, but that is one of those quote unquote traditions. It's just like deer dog drives in the South, right? It's the same thing. But, the fact that, it just, when I would think of deer hunting growing up, especially gun season, I thought of deer drives. That's all I ever did. And it's just, I don't know. It was just part of me. It was how I was raised to hunt, essentially. It was how my dad was taught to hunt, and so on and so forth, I guess.
Dude, I came to my realization a little different way, but like I've gotten to a point, well, here, I'll just share with you. So I don't know, 10 years ago or whatever, I started really getting into bow hunting. I'm like, man, this is way more fun for me. I enjoy this more than hunting with a gun. And so I didn't really do it. We kind of like patrolled. We would make sure nobody was trespassing on opening day. And then I had a few occasions where on like opening day, it was like, I could go out and sit, I haven't filled a tag yet. And I did kind of here and there. And like over time, and as I've heard more stories like that, and, I've had more encounters with people in the woods, I understand more the mindset of a lot of, hunter, quote unquote hunters. And dude, I'm borderline afraid to go in the woods during gun season.
It's not safe in a lot of spots.
Not to drive or anything. It's just, I just know how people are. I've seen people get shot at. I know how people handle weapons, and I don't trust people, and even enough to be on my own private land of potentially a few hundred acres.
Anyone who's done deer drives long enough, including myself, my family, I remember several times as a young kid, and even when I was in college, like I've had bullets zing. It's close enough that you hear them and you hit the ground. And that's not a fun feeling.
And dude, so they're for different reasons. Like firearm, I think, David, you're exactly right. It's an issue of safety. It allows people, unpracticed people, to go out into the woods with a firearm and kill things with it. It's a different argument, and it's more in favor of like the wildlife and the respect that we should give them. Is like, and we're not against crossbows inherently. I think they're great. I think there's a time and there's a place for them. But the fact is, more so than like traditional archery equipment and compound archery equipment, it allows for the opportunity for unpracticed individuals to go out and fire a trajectory. And so like the chance of you shooting another human being with a crossbow is very low. Like you really got to be doing something wrong. But the chances of you being overconfident in your abilities or the ability of your weapon to kill an animal, I think creates some unethical opportunities, scenarios.
Well, I think that archery was created to see how close we could get.
Yep.
You know, that's what the states devise. That's what the all modern, when they go back to the, primitive weapon seasons where they include a muzzleloader. They didn't mean a muzzleloader that would shoot 600 yards with a,
that wasn't even a thing.
They meant flintlock.
It probably was the other way
and
too,
patch.
David. It was like, how do we get closer than that?
Yeah.
or how do we extend our range from this knife in my hand?
Yeah.
And so I think when we're talking primitive weapons and we're talking a bow and arrow, having to draw the bow means you got to make some kind of a movement within a certain amount of yardage of that animal. You're going to hear us. We're big on proponents. We don't shoot very far on whitetail deer. And what I love hearing is the guys that going out west, right? Guy lives in Pennsylvania and he's like, yeah, I don't shoot more than 40 yards. I can't see more than 40 yards typically anywhere that I hunt with my bow. But I'm going out to hunt an elk. So I'm going to shoot 80 yards. They told me I better be ready to shoot 80 yards. If you can't shoot 80 yards at home, you don't need to be shooting 80 yards in Montana or Colorado or anywhere else. What it means is you got to be a better hunter. You got to get closer to the animal. I've killed lots of elk. I used to outfit. I've never shot one over 50 yards. All of them have been under 40. I know there's lots of named hunters out there that have shot 100, 120 yards. There's so many things that animal can do to screw up that shot.
Agree.
It has nothing to do with what you're doing. There are people out there that can make that shot. I'm not doubting that, but there's also people out there that could make that shot and the animal's not there by the time the arrow gets there.
Yep.
And it is impressive, but it's risky.
Well, and I think that it's not to say that people can't make those shots, right? Because they clearly have. It's a false confidence as a larger community that I can make that shot. There are certain people that go out there, like Levi Morgan. Levi probably shoots, I don't know how many arrows a day, and a ton, right? And he can go out and there's still things that can go wrong. He could shoot an animal at 100 yards if he wanted to. It's a great shot. That said, like the false confidence that if I go out and pick up X bow and I can go shoot 80 yards consistently with it is wrong, right? That it's not right. It's a false, security of what you think you can do. And that's where we do have some issues with a crossbow. Like my kids shoot a crossbow. They will not shoot a crossbow past 25 yards. I just won't let them. Could they shoot it at 50? For sure. But I won't let them because there's more things that go wrong with every distance that increases past 25.
Sure.
It's just how it is. So, yeah, it's a weird thing. Whereas if you pick up a compound bow and you go out and try to shoot 50 yards, if you've never shot a compound bow or you're a rookie at it, good luck hitting the target at 50 yards. It's just not, it's a trained thing that has to come along with practice.
Yeah. And I think I guess we need to continually drive home, like we are not against crossbows. Like I think it's a fantastic weapon. You just have to have the self-control and the discipline to know what that weapon is capable of and to still understand the risks when you start to increase yardage.
Yeah. Anybody tells me that they shot an arrow or a bolt past 50 yards at a deer, and I cringe a little bit. I'm not saying that you can't kill one. It doesn't matter what it came from.
It doesn't make you a bad person. Dude, you and I both missed deer at like 70 yards this year.
Yes.
And it's like...
And we practiced a lot, and we thought we were good out to 80.
This is in South Dakota.
How it was.
And dude, immediately after, found myself asking the question, like, should I have taken that shot?
100%.
And here's what I came to the conclusion of. It was a clean miss, so I'm glad I took it.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that's right. This is just how I felt. Had I wounded that thing,
yes,
it would have been a no.
Yeah.
It would have been I absolutely should not have taken that shot.
Same. Yeah.
And that's the risk that you're taking, at that distance.
I agree.
Yeah. I just don't, and I guess maybe I just don't want that mental battle.
Yeah.
So I drew a line and I said 40 yards is it. When I get to 40 yards, they're within shooting range. When they're past 40 yards, they're outside of shooting range. And people told me I killed an oryx this year in New Mexico, and they told me there's no way that you're killing one with a bow, and especially get close. And I shot it at 33 yards. Not saying that I'm doing anything any different than anyone, but
sure.
Just like knocking on doors, it just means I have to think differently. and that I don't even hesitate. I had the Oryx at 48 yards and I didn't even think about shooting. I was like, I got to get to that bush to get a good shot.
Well, and that's what we love about bow hunting. I mean, the fact is when you're in a tree and you're hunting a whitetail and it's coming underneath your platform at 4 yards and it's this mature giant buck, you're just, I mean, that's what you live for. That's it. Yeah. That's what it all comes down to. Like, yeah, it would be cool.
I understand the temptation.
It'd be cool to make a shot at 60 yards on that buck, but like you put them like under your feet, and like that's why when you release the arrow, you're rattled because like you were trying to hold everything together at that moment to make that shot happen, and he was within 3 yards of you and had no idea you were there. How cool is that? That's what I mean. That's what I keep going back to with some of these guys, and I'm like, you know, and even my kids, like, you know, there's times I have them hold off on like a doe or something. And my 6-year-old shot his first buck with a crossbow this year, and it was awesome. We had a doe at 3 yards, and she had no idea it was there. And he was shaking so bad. I'm like, buddy, you got to settle down, or you're not going to make a shot if one comes out. But it's for that purpose, right? It's not like the first deer that came out at 100 yards, he shot, and it was like, cool, what'd you think about hunting? Like it. And again, that's where I think when you... And it's not saying that anybody's wrong in that, but everybody hunts for a different reason, which is why we're having this podcast, right? Is like, how do we get to the root? Because I won't understand the guy who shoots X crossbow at 80 yards and he's only killed deer at 80 yards with a crossbow. I just won't understand him. And that's okay. I'm not saying that he's wrong. I'm just saying I don't understand why you do that and why you love it. I understand why I love that buck is under my feet and I just put an arrow in him at 3 yards and watch him fall. And again, I don't know. Like but we all have to talk about it because we're all in the same pool, which is hunters.
Agreed.
Yeah.
It's weird.
I mean, it's a lot of it makes sense. I mean, we're like it seems like all three of us are kind of on the same page, and like we're fortunate enough to have experienced like. I hate to say the purest because there's not like there's a right way or a wrong way, but like, dude, I shot a big whitetail with my bow at like 7 yards on November 3rd this past year on private land that wasn't pressured. And it was like the most amazing thing that's ever happened to me. And a week later, I went to Illinois and hunted public land where I ran into 100 guys and didn't see a deer over 2.5 years old. And it freaking sucked. And so like, I'm just trying to like, not everybody's going to be able to, but like whether it's the pursuit of private land ownership or to be able to hunt there or to have an intimate close range encounter, with a compound bow, like this weapon that requires a lot of practice. It's like, for me, like the more years that I hunt, the more experiences, positive and negative that I have, like the more I'm seeking out that like most purest of like of experiences, and I just want to share that with people. It's not that that's right or they have to be at that point with me or whatever.
Yeah.
But I'm having a freaking lot of fun with it, and like I wish other people could experience that too.
And that's what's confusing to me, because maybe the guy who is out there just a rifle hunter, just an opening day rifle hunter, says, Jared, I have that experience on opening day. I'll sit there and the first legal buck that comes through, I shoot it, and I have that exact same feeling. I'm just trying to understand.
No, it's not the same thing.
You can't say that.
I can, because dude,
you can't.
I can make a pretty educated guess that guy is not obsessing over that moment the entire year or for the past several years as I have.
Maybe not. I don't know. I mean, that's what I remember. To David's point, like I remember I was 15, 16.
It's still fun. I'm just not saying it's not fun or.
I was 16. First buck I killed was this 7-inch spike on like opening day of rifle. And like I can replay that entire moment now, whatever, 6, 8, 20 years later, like in my head to a T, because like I lived for that moment. Like my entire, since I was 9 and in the woods with my dad to the time I started hunting when I was 12 to when I killed that first buck at 16, like I lived for that moment. And yeah, it was with a gun on opening day of gun season, but like I understand that feeling. I can't argue that the guy who just goes out opening day and shoots the first deer he sees doesn't feel that, because I did at one point. I don't anymore. I've evolved, in my opinion, as a hunter.
Okay, I see that. I guess let me defend my statement. What I'm saying is because of the time effort, sacrifice that I make to achieve a certain moment, I know that I'm getting more gratification out of it because I earned it.
I get it.
Not that that guy didn't earn it, but there's not as much effort put into that. Thus, there's probably not as much reward.
I don't know how we qualify any of that. I mean,
that's it.
So that's it. And
who's right, David?
Just end it for us.
I'm just like, I'm sitting here thinking, well, we haven't discussed Trump and we haven't discussed the vaccine. There's only a few things we haven't hit on, but I feel like we've covered a bunch. I got another appointment I got to have.
No, we're done, man.
No
we appreciate it. It is. We're circling around something here, though, David, that has been a mission of Jared and ours for a long time. And I think with you and Karen and what you guys have done at Raised Hunting, but also Raised at Full Draw, it's that we're all in the same pool together. Yep. And we have to coexist. Ultimately, none of us will survive if we don't coexist. That's the weird thing about it. But just understanding each other and trying to get a discussion going is what seems to be, for some reason, so damn hard. Like, if you're just a gun hunter, tell me why. Like, what gets why? And
our guards are up because of, fights and feuds on social media, and we're following different influencers and all this stuff, and there's a lot of ego involved in the sport. There's a lot of passion wrapped up in it, and so you have to let your guard down to be able to have these conversations and be willing to hear other people's perspectives. And that's why I start every sentiment that I have here is that hey, I could be dead wrong about this. This is my experience here, but ultimately, we've had some really good conversations, once we figured out how to do that.
That's it, man.
Maybe that's the next podcast. Maybe you need to have someone from different walks of life, 3 or 4 of them.
Absolutely.
There you go. All right, man. Well, we'll let you go.
Yeah, make sure that it's not a debate. It's about hearing each other.
That's it. That is the key. And that's the first step to that. And we've actually done it surprisingly in a year, let's just say, is other people from other perspectives talking. So at least comments, keep them comment. We may not agree with you, but let's hear why.
We like to say we're on the journey to the center of what it means to be a hunter. And so we're trying to talk over people less. And just listen to where people are coming from, and it's really helped us to shape our own opinions. And
it makes you a good husband when you listen more and talk less.
I'm a great husband.
I'm not saying I listen. Whether I process it is a whole different
humble
ballgame.
Too. Pretty much the most humble person I know.
All right. Well, David, we appreciate you coming on, man. As always, great to catch up with you, and you have to keep us posted on what the next shed you find out there in Iowa is, so you can set your sights on 22.
David, we're actually talking to Jeremy Moore next week, so I know that's where you guys got your dog and stuff, so I'm sure he'll come up.
Cool. Tell him I said hi.
We will, man. Well, all right, brother. We appreciate it.
Man.
See you, David.
Later.
Sweet. Circling it.
Those are great.
Circling it. We're there.
Yeah.
It's interesting because I know David brings a perspective that is very similar to us, but not exactly, because, the Raised at Full Draw campaign that he has put together with Karen and Donise, is very much to keep growing hunting. And I'm for that, for sure, especially on the young kid recruitment, new hunters, especially.
I don't know. I think our conversation with him today kind of gave me a little bit new. Initially, I would have said, they're recruiting hunters as kids. And they definitely are. But David seems to have evolved to a point where he's the numbers are important, but the kids that are coming out of his camp, he wants them to be able to influence this 80%, as to who we really are. Yeah. And I think that's super cool. The fact that they're doing interactions with landowners.
It's huge, man.
Yeah, it's very cool.
Well, and again, if you look at some of the statistics that are out there, most non-hunters look favorably upon hunting, especially in terms of sustenance and food and whatever else, right? It's the trophy hunting, which is such a speculative term, because I think at one point in time, trophy hunting was looked at as, Jared, you want to kill a big buck, thus you're a trophy hunter. And that's not how it is today. In that, like, as much as it is the guy who goes and pays $15,000 to shoot a giraffe or whatever it is, right? That's that when people throw the term trophy hunting out in today's society, that's what the non-hunter thinks, right? The non-hunter doesn't think of this necessarily.
It's nuanced, just like anything. Like, because we're in it, I think you and I think of trophy hunting as like you said, somebody who will pay a fee to go in and in a lot of cases shoot an fenced or enclosed animal because of its nature, like its giant antlers and stuff. And like, I think for us, like,
that's the furthest from our mindsets.
Yeah. Like, well, it is and it isn't. Like, we do want to kill an animal with those attributes, like the most mature, the biggest set of antlers.
And that is unpressured.
And like all these different things that we're trying to create. But I like to think we're going about it in a more fair way.
I mean, we both get it. Like, the fact is, if we are hunting a big buck and it gets shot by the neighbor, nobody's going to say, oh, that's great. Like, there's an element of like, wish it, like, I put into it. I was after that deer. I wanted it. But that's what makes what we do so cool. Like, if every year you and I went out and killed 5 booners,
it's a fair chase element.
Yeah.
As I'm thinking about it here,
that's
because
exactly
dude, we want to kill the biggest, most mature buck. Like, we've evolved to that point with, the archery tackle that we've chosen.
Mm-hmm.
The big factor is fair chase. And yes, there's nuance even in that. Some people will say,
private.
well, you're using, a high-tech Hoyt bow. That's an argument.
You have a cell camera.
There's a cell camera.
It's a big argument.
Okay.
Now.
Yep. And that's why
baiting, non-baiting.
Yeah.
Food plots, no food plots. Like, there's a ton. It could go up to now. It's probably because of Zach at Hunting Public, ground versus tree. Like, there's a ton of atmosphere around what is the fair chase of it. I think it comes down to just the ability to kill repeatedly. Like, and I say that if we went out and we kill every year, we killed a booner, which in our mind is climax. I want to kill a giant buck every year. At some point, we would be looking for the next challenge. We'd be looking for the next evolution. The fact is, even with the land that we have and the technology we have and the tools we have, the odds of you and I killing a booner every year isn't good. And that's not because of our hunting skill. It's just because a booner...
Where we live.
Oh, a gross booner is a rare animal where we live.
Yep.
And even in general, it'd be like saying, I want to kill a 200 in Iowa every year. It just doesn't exist, right? You can't kill 200 if he's not there. So I think that for us, that's why we've set it at this mature animal status, because usually every year there is a good opportunity at a mature animal.
It's a really good benchmark. For reasons we've talked about, antlers, you run out of inches eventually. You can't keep killing a 180, 190. You run out.
Yeah, it stops.
With a mature animal, like, there's just so much, and let's call it a 5, 6-year-old, 4 or 5, 6-year-old buck, depending on wherever you're at and stuff. What's cool about that benchmark is, like, yes, they're going to display the greatest antler potential.
Mm-hmm.
So
should be
check
big.
that box.
Yep.
You've also probably got the most amount of history with them, which allows you to build some kind of a relationship.
Listen to what David started off with in this podcast.
The journey of killing a mature buck. So you're along for the ride with that.
Yep.
And ultimately they're probably as smart as
They should be the smartest deer in the woods, minus that doe that always blows at you.
Yeah. So it's kind of like the stakes are the highest. The reward is the greatest.
Yeah.
And
that's why seems like
it.
the pinnacle. And that's why, like, I don't knock anybody that goes out and shoots a 1.5 or 2.5-year-old buck or whatever the first buck they see. It's that until you try, like, honestly try to dedicate yourself to harvesting a mature animal, public, private, doesn't matter. That is a mega challenge as a hunter, especially as a bow hunter. And when you accomplish that feeling, which we've been fortunate to have done, you're hooked. It's just like that first deer. When that young kid kills that first deer and you see it on his face, he's hooked. When you put the effort in to kill a mature buck, and it probably won't happen the first season or two, but finally you pull it off and you kill that mature buck, public or private, doesn't matter. You're hooked on that feeling. And to the point of, as much as you want to kill a deer every year, case in point this year for me, I really, really wanted to try to kill that 200-inch deer, that mature buck in Columbus. And I missed out on opportunities to probably kill other mature bucks in other areas because that was the only place I really put myself into. I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
And I'm looking forward to next year.
Yeah, and dude, that's not to say that we don't hunt deer because of their antlers. Like,
yeah, I tried to kill a 200-incher.
Yeah, case in point, like my uncle will say sometimes, well, I know you don't care about the antler size, you only care about the age.
Not true.
No. I care about the antler size.
Yeah.
And I want to kill a big antlered buck.
Yeah.
But I don't want to kill a young big antlered buck who has lots of room to grow. Like
100%.
To me, it's kind of wasteful.
Where it's like this deer scored 115 inches, but was probably 7, 8 years old and was a monster. And that was this was a buck that I like, there's a reason he's sitting on this table constantly.
Yeah.
That buck is a lot bigger than him and was younger. I didn't have near as much history as this deer. So like I have good memories of that deer, but I have lots of memories of this deer.
Yeah.
And it's just a weird situation.
Every situation is different, man. That's why there are some situations where I'll say generally, those things are not good. But like in most cases, we know that there's nuance to like every deer that's harvested and in every hunter's situation, the weapon they choose to use, the locations they have to go hunt. So like we're not judgmental at all. Like
no.
Yeah, I think we want to be really open to everyone being a member of the hunting community.
I want you to hunt. I'm not saying don't hunt. I want you to be a hunter, whether you're a gun hunter, bow hunter, crossbow hunter, doesn't matter, right? I want you to be a hunter, but I want you to be a responsible hunter, and I want you to grow as a hunter. That's really what I'm looking for. So even when like, if, I rag on the crossbow guys, I want you to, and maybe you killed a ton of deer with a compound bow or a recurve bow. Cool, man. You're better than I am. But if you haven't, I want you to grow as a hunter. I want you to try. What's it going to hurt? You're not going to kill a deer? Hey, that's okay. Happens to all of us. There's a weird perception around deer hunters especially, and I would say even guys to single us out, that if you don't kill a buck, you're not a good hunter. And I see so many of those people.
I would say that's the perception of a less educated hunter, less experienced.
I agree.
Because for you and I to hear that, we're like, oh, dude, us either. But
that's the majority of hunters, I think, is that person who isn't this group, right? The David Holders. And so with that, what I don't like seeing is, I shot that basket 8. Well, why? Well, season's almost over. Well, so? Well, I need a buck. Well, why? Because I have a tag. Yeah, so what if you don't fill it? Well, then I didn't get a buck. And it's this circle we live in, and I'm like, yeah, that's okay.
Well, dude, there's my dad's generation, David's generation, like that is the mindset. Like, and I understand they had a different, we talked to Eberhard about it, that it was different back then. Like, dude, just to kill a buck that was a big deal.
You killed a buck.
The resources changed.
I grew up that way.
And like our mindsets about it have kind of evolved as well. And so, like I said, there's nuance in all of it.
We're getting there.
I certainly
slowly digging to the center.
Yeah, I feel like, even though we rag on whatever crossbows and all this different stuff, like I feel like I'm starting to understand where, a broader depth of or breadth of hunters are coming from. Like generally speaking, I get it.
I'd love to hear from some of these guys, and I know we do in the comments, and it really is good fun and discussion to have with some of these guys. I just would love to understand where I lose them, because I've hunted with all of them. I haven't killed a deer with a crossbow, but I've killed plenty of deer with rifles and shotguns and muzzleloaders and everything else. Is why they don't see it as an evolution. Like, to me, I kept saying, cool, what's the next challenge? What's the next challenge?
Yeah,
what's the next challenge?
That is interesting. And I don't know if that is a hunting related thing as much as it is a personality thing.
I mean, I see it as an entrepreneur. What's the next challenge? I can say
what's
the next challenge?
Exactly.
What's the next
Because
challenge?
I know what your and I's mindset is in life, in business. Like, we want that. What's next? What's the next challenge? How do we improve? How do we grow on? How do we invest? And so in this future, this is better. There are some people that just aren't minded that way. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing. It's different from how we are, but there are some people who just do the thing because that's the thing that they do, or they do it for
and there
a
still
different
are
reason.
levels above. I mean, guys have challenged me to say, well, dude, go pick up a recurve and go kill one. I'm not ready yet.
Dude, I'd like that challenge.
I know.
Actually. Well, listen,
I'm not ready for it yet. I haven't done enough damage on the compound side to go to that level. I get it.
Yeah.
And I know if there are guys like, what's the string stalker guy?
Mm-hmm.
Like, dude, that dude is a badass.
What's his name?
Can't remember. I'm not there yet.
He's legit.
I'd love to be. I'm just not there.
Well, so I don't need to, but I'll defend myself here. So I read one of those YouTube comments, and it was like, it was calling me selfish for wanting to make
deer hunting harder.
it harder. Like I would say,
Yeah.
because of my respect for the animal and my desire to see them reach
Yes.
maturity.
You're all for making things harder.
Yep. I'm just in favor. So that would be removal of corn piles. To a certain level, where I would want to defend, like, hey, I still want to use my bow, like my compound bow, like so cell cams would be another one that makes it easier.
Mm-hmm.
Just even trail cameras in general, all these things that you could argue are giving you an unfair advantage. Like, okay, and so that I think the guy that commented was like, well, you're just selfish, like you want all the deer for yourself, and I'm like, no, I'm saying I also would abide by these laws. Like, it's not like I want everybody else to abide by them and not me. Like. If it has to be everybody, like so in general, I would say I am in favor. Like if there was a side of the political spectrum of
not
hunting
just
I'm on,
you, not
for
just
everybody,
them, everybody.
Yeah, right.
Handicap.
I wish it was.
Well, I mean, we talk about Ohio, and I hope we get into this more. Somebody asked a great question: is if
I do need to finish that, and if that meant me ultimately moving to like a recurve bow, if that's what that entailed. Okay.
So be it.
Well,
see, that's where the challenge accepted mindset.
Challenge accepted
is for us, right?
Yeah.
Somebody said,
not yet, but maybe I'll get there.
Basically, say, if we found or if they discovered improved chronic wasting disease (CWD) in Ohio, do you think that they would get rid of baiting? My answer is yes. That if they found chronic wasting disease in Ohio, in certain places in Ohio especially, that baiting would be immediately banned from it. Yeah, nobody wants to find CWD. That said, that could be the gateway to Ohio being removed from baiting. And again, I bait. My farm I just bought.
Me too. I talk all the time about shooting deer over corn. We're trying to shoot deer over corn piles.
Yeah, it's not easy. But I think what's weird about the situation and where we're getting here, where everybody should be listening to this thing and where we're targeting in is number one, why do you hunt? Why do you do it? Like, if it's purely like, oh, I want to kill a buck to kill a buck, I'm sorry, I don't respect you.
And I was thinking about this at the very beginning of this podcast. It's hard to describe, man. Like, for me, it's a purpose. Like, I feel a purpose. Like, this is what I'm supposed to be doing. Mm-hmm. It's just hard to describe that feeling of like.
Which is why I enjoy the off season as much, if not more, than the regular season. Because like my purpose is to just manage the land and deer and see deer like that. That's why, to the counter of cell cameras, I love cell cameras because as we're even sitting here, I'm getting notifications and I'm like, man, I can't wait to see what's on that camera. Mm-hmm. Did that like one of my bucks shed last night? There it is. The interaction of those cameras is what I like. To David's point, I completely agree that they've been abused.
Yeah.
In fact, I'll find myself guilty of it, sitting here in the office, get a picture of a buck, and I'm like, shit, I better go. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's cheating in a way. I admit it, and it's legal, and so I do it.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that there are certain things that we're all right around it. We're all hovering around it. What I am fearful of, and it's a reiteration of what we said a couple weeks ago, is there is a finite amount of resource, land and deer. How much can we push that bar before we ruin it for everybody? And I don't know that answer. And I mean, how many people can I shove into this parcel of public to hunt? How many deer, because it's legal, I can kill 2 bucks and 4 does or whatever? How many people should be doing that eventually it's good for the herd because it's statewide legal? Those are the things that nobody's addressing yet. Mm-hmm. Nobody's talking about.
And it's fluid. Like,
it is very
population,
fluid.
Populations
100%.
are ever changing.
And
guys' perceptions of different places to hunt is ever so, somebody whatever, pointed out Pike County, Illinois. And then so there might be a 5, 10, 15-year period where it's getting pounded, and then the herd goes like this, and then those guys will leave. And then so it's just, it's like anything, trying to stay ahead of it, do your research, do your own
I
thing.
guess
And
the question is, do we feel that the current hunting population is smart enough and can be trusted enough with the liberal bag limits of hunting is declining from state regulations?
What's your question?
Do we feel that the current hunting public, the current hunting population, right, can be trusted with the liberal bag limits that were assigned by many state agencies because they thought hunting was declining?
Oh.
And it really wasn't. Can this hunting...
Is that what's happening? They're assigning a higher bag limit
They had.
to increase hunter numbers?
They had more opportunities. Crossbows
I would just
and
think
archery.
they would issue more tags, not increase bag limits.
Both.
Oh. Well, it is the regulatory agency's responsibility to make those decisions, not the hunters.
Agree.
And so hunters should make hunt however they want within the legal
That's what I'm
rights.
asking. Within the legal bounds, but I don't think that's right.
Dude, and in the same
Just
way...
because you can kill 3 bucks and 5 does in an area doesn't mean you should.
Yeah.
That's the fine line we're walking here.
Yeah. I don't know. At some point, like,
Would
you're
you-
asking too
would
much,
you
I think,
kill-
of an individual to understand population
Would you be
dynamics.
okay if everybody walked on your parents' place and killed 3 bucks because they were allowed to, if Ohio let you do it?
No, it wouldn't be ideal.
That's what I'm saying. So
Well, okay. We'll save it for another podcast, but that's back into the ineffectiveness,
ineffectiveness.
inability, as I guess, for regulatory agents to manage at a micro level. Can't do it.
Can't do it, so it's on us to do it. And that's where I'm at. I think some of us are smart enough and care enough about the resource to do it. Per the Deer Drive comment, a lot of them aren't. If it's legal, I can do it. And can you blame them?
To be continued, I guess.
That's it for this episode of HUNTR Podcast, episode 59 with David Holder. If you're listening to this, it's February 1. Welcome to shed season.
Shed season, switchgrass.
Frost seeding.
Yep, frost seeding. All that good stuff is going to be happening.
Yep. We'll keep on the discussion, and we'll see you next time.
Later.
Take me